Here on these third Sundays, we've been looking at parables in the New Testament. I realized, having looked on my Bible program wherein I write my sermons, that apparently I have missed, having last week been one of them, two third Sundays this year, and that's just unacceptable. The reality is we have been looking at this year as a theme the parables of the New Testament. Here on these third Sundays, I appreciate the opportunity once again that we have, that God has given us, to worship Him and to sing such wonderful praises. And Michael, to lead us in those songs, we'll be looking at Luke chapter 10 in particular today, in verses 25 through 37, where there is a very familiar parable in which we are certainly aware of, and that is what is commonly called the parable of the Good Samaritan. And we remember, of course, what has led up to Jesus describing this parable and telling this parable. He was being put to the test, wasn't he? And asked, well, who is my neighbor? And of course, Jesus then gives this parable about a man who had gone on a journey and he had gotten beaten up and left for dead. In fact, the text says he was halfway there. And a priest walked by and did nothing, seeing him and ignoring him. A Levite walked by and did nothing. But then a Samaritan, one of the enemies of the Jews, as you and I remember. A Samaritan walked by, saw the man, had compassion on him, gathered him up, took care of him, took him to the inn, and then paid for, out of his own pocket, his medical needs. And so Jesus then asked who was the neighbor there. And of course, the Jews had to admit it was the Good Samaritan. And in this particular parable, I think there are three important lessons we can learn today that I want us to consider if you have your handout there. The first being, compassion is based on need and not worth. The reality is that this particular man did not seem worth the time to the Jewish priest and to the Jewish Levite of the parable. He wasn't worth any amount of money to them. Even though he was in great need. Again, he had been beaten half to death. He had been left for dead, but they saw no value in this gentleman. The Good Samaritan, on the other hand, though not caring about his value, certainly saw the need that was there. He saw the man that had been beaten and needed help. The reality is we know nothing of the worth of this man, whether it be financially or otherwise, when it comes to society's standards. However, in Luke chapter 10 and verse 30, we read this: a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers who had stripped him, beat him, and departed, leaving him half dead. This man was in need. It didn't matter if he was poor or rich. It didn't matter if he had been a Pharisee or a Sadducee or a beggar on the side of the road. His situation is what was important. We learn from this parable that having compassion for others shouldn't be based on who we value more. It shouldn't be based on some arbitrary value we place on anyone, because everyone has value in the sight of God. God saw it personally necessary to create that person and their soul and give them life. And if that is the case, then they certainly have value. And yet I think of this parable and the two that left this man for dead, so seeing no value in him or value in helping him. Thankfully, God doesn't base His compassion on our worth. Because the reality is, as you and I know, Romans 3, 9, and 10, our value due to sin is that of worthlessness. What then? Are the Jews any better off? No, not at all. For we have already charged that all, both Jew and Greeks, are under sin. As it is written, none is righteous, no, not one. From strictly a value reality. When it comes to righteousness to unrighteousness, Romans 3:23, as we saw, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, and yet God, thankfully, saw our need. He recognized and had compassion on us even though we were worthless servants, as Jesus proclaimed. And we read, but God showed His love for us, in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Compassion is not based on any arbitrary word. What we learn here is certainly based on need. What else do we learn from this parable about compassion? Well, we learn from this parable that compassion feels something. In other words, there needs to be something that moves within us when someone is in need. The Good Samaritan, unlike the priest and unlike the Levite, was moved at the one he saw in need. In Luke 10, starting in 31, now by chance a priest was going down the road, and when he saw him, notice he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. He was moved by what he saw. He was moved by the need that was there before him. The reality is, when we see someone in need, it should move us. It should stir something within us. It should trouble our heart with compassion of their need. Now, that doesn't always mean we can make a change or that we can do anything at that moment, but it should certainly, for a child of God who knows the value of a soul, it should impact us. It's no wonder Jesus said there in Matthew 25, 35 through 40, of those who are faithful Christians concerning their passage, for I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. Then the righteous will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you? And the king will answer them, truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers, you did it to me. The Good Samaritan, two words, by the way, the Jews had never put together. The Good Samaritan was the one that loved his neighbor more than the Jews who passed by, their fellow man. Because it pricked his heart, it moved him. It troubled him to see his fellow human being, his fellow created by God, who has a soul and an eternity waiting, to see him in that condition. Lastly, compassion will always cost us something. Not only are we going to feel something, or should feel something, but it will always cost us something. It's demanded. Compassion is not convenient. It demands something out of us. It demands, when we show compassion to others, our time or our schedule, our pride, and sometimes our pocketbook. It's going to demand something out of us. In Luke 10 and verse 35, we read, and the next day he took out 2 denarii, that's 2 whole days' worth of work, and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back. We must do more than just talk about helping those in need, those we have and should have compassion for. We have to do something. James says a little something about this, doesn't he, in James chapter 2, verses 14 through 17? What good is it, my brothers, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can that faith save him? If a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says to them, go in peace, be warmed and filled, without giving them the things needed for the body, what good is that? So also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. Compassion ought to cost us something. In fact, it will. It's demanded. The very fact that we take time to show compassion and help others when they are in need is going to cost us something. When we look at the parable of the Good Samaritan, we find many other valuable lessons, certainly. These will suffice for this afternoon. But loving our neighbor means showing compassion. Loving our neighbor means caring and having compassion for those that are in need, and wherein we can help and have an effect. For those in need, we certainly do. We learn compassion is not based on the perceived worth of someone, nor is it caused by some callous, but should prick our hearts, and it should and will always cost us something. In the parable of the Good Samaritan, we learn a lot. Maybe there's someone here this afternoon, as you reflect upon your walk with God, as you reflect upon being a neighbor to others, maybe there's something that you need to make a change in your life. Maybe it's not compassion, maybe it's something else. Whatever that is, don't go out those doors without making it first right with God. And if you need help from this church, this family who loves you so dearly, let us help. Let us be that encouragement. Let us be that strength. So this afternoon, if you need that, let us be here for you by coming forward as we stand and as we sing.